Consequence is a result or an outcome of a decision or an event that happened earlier, right? And so when we make decisions, there are consequences that come as a result of that. And so if someone takes a wife from among the Philistines, so to speak, we can only expect consequences to come, negative consequences as a result of it. Samson failed in that he didn't seek counsel ahead of time. In other words, it would be advisable for any man, young man or young woman, if they had an interest in the opposite sex, before they allowed that relationship to start, to seek counsel. That's the time to seek counsel. Not once it gets going, because once it gets going, it snowballs, and it's like a runaway train. Now there's emotions involved, and it's hard to backtrack. And so the time to seek counsel is at the very start. Samson didn't do that. He went to Timnah, and we don't know the reasons. I can't vouch for his motivation going down into Philistine territory to seek a wife. I don't know if he went there to seek a wife or what, but when he was there, he saw a woman of the Philistines and was taken by her. And apparently it was a matter of simply a physical attraction. She wasn't a child of God. She wasn't among the people of God. And he came back, and rather than asking his father his counsel or his advice, he simply stated to his father, I met a woman from the Philistines, get her for me. And so you kind of feel for the father, don't you? Why didn't you even ask? Here you're my son, and you're about to make the biggest decision of your life, and you didn't even ask my counsel. So it's easy to see how at least it's a violation of the fifth commandment to honor your parents. But that is the point in which counsel needs to be sought at the very start. Now, he didn't seek that counsel at the start. You feel for his poor father, who then attempts to counsel him. He says, but aren't there women among your own people of Israel that you should take a wife from an uncircumcised Philistines, from the people that are heathens? And so the father, he dares to give counsel to his son, and we as parents, we ought to take that example. We ought to dare to counsel our children. But again, Samson, in his foolishness, disregarded the counsel of his father, and it is his mother also there in that verse. It says his father and mother. He disregarded that counsel, and he said, she looks good to me. And literally in the Hebrew, that means she looks right in my eyes. And so there's that stubbornness, about those that have become involved in an infatuous relationship that causes them to just disregard counsel and proceed.
I think they would seek counsel from if the father is not in the picture, or if they know the father is not going to even care.
Well, here's what normally happens. A fellow's got his eye on a girl. He starts sending out signals. Before you know it, there's a fire burning. Neither one of them can put it out without major difficulty. They begin to counsel with their peers. He goes to his best friend and says, hey, what do you think about this girl? And his best friend, of course, he has no wisdom about him. He's got no years. He says, sure, I think she likes you. Go for it. And so the first thing that happens, the first mistake that happens is horizontal counsel. They go to their peers. What needs to happen is parental counsel first. The parents are the first line of defense, so to speak. In the abundance of counselors, there's victory, right? But you have your parents, and they're your first line of defense, like we were just talking. But he didn't go to his father and mother, and when they gave him counsel, he didn't heed it. Nowadays, if a young person would be interested in a girl, he needs to first seek counsel from his parents. If his parents are unconverted, that doesn't mean you just throw out any of their opinions. Their opinions can still be very valuable, even though the spiritual state of their soul is poor. In other words, there are good, healthy, vital marriages among unbelievers. Some unbelievers still have some wisdom about them in matters of compatibility and just good general counsel. This person shouldn't disregard parental counsel if their parents are non-Christian. Then the next line would be your pastors. Go to your pastors and ask them, what about this person? Now all of this is before any indications have been given to the other person that started the fire going. You see, it's like the match hasn't been tossed to the kindling yet. And you're discussing whether or not it's wise to even toss the match to the kindling. And so he goes to the pastors and asks them their counsel, and of course they'll be able to guide him and give him direction. And then beyond that, anyone who has a godly walk with the Lord could have something that would be missed by any pastor, even alone, if he's a godly man following God.
So when Samson says, get her for me, for she looks good to me, do you see that as a mindset that maybe immature or new believers kind of enter into, where they're judging their future mate not on the spiritual condition of the soul of the woman, but rather just looking at the outward appearance? You see that as normally a stumbling block there?
Mm-hmm. I think so. The Bible doesn't say that we have to marry wives that aren't physically attractive. It doesn't say that. But apparently in Samson's case, his interest was based solely on that. Because he was outside of the will of God, he didn't inquire anything about the spiritual status of the woman. She was a Philistine. Mm. And so she wasn't even among the people of God. So he was wrong even in pursuing her in the first place. But it is apparently a lust of the eyes that drove him to that unholy infatuation, which is what we call it. Samson didn't fall in love. He fell in lust, some say. He saw a woman and he wanted her. And so I believe that's an accurate way of understanding it. When it comes to emotional attachments, it seems to me that that's the very beginning. We send signals to the opposite sex that may or may not be treated, may or may not be interpreted rightly, and then signals are returned back to the other person, and before you know it, there's a relationship building there that is not necessarily founded on lust, but it has opened the door to it. And an emotional attachment still involves a giving of your heart in some way to that person. And a giving of your heart to someone of the opposite sex needs to be reserved for a husband and a wife, and not pieces along the way, on the trail, so to speak, when we finally wind up married. And so that's one negative. I don't know that I have any scriptures that come to my mind that would deal with that in particular, other than it's not advisable. And then another thing, if these emotional attachments need to be broken off because of some objective reason at a later date, now it's very painful. Now it's not impossible, because the hearts are given, they're intertwined. And so that's a very difficult thing, because when the relationship starts and gets a head of steam behind it, so to speak, the first thing that happens is objectivity goes out the window. And now reality isn't faced, and real reasons and real objections aren't honestly evaluated and answered. And emotions drive the decisions, because there's an infatuation and an attachment. There, the heart is given. Now things are excused and things are avoided being looked at under the true light of scrutiny. And so there's not adequate, honest scrutiny there. These little infatuations that start and these emotional attachments in relationships, they're not small things. We might view them as that. Society calls it puppy love, but it's not that way. It starts that way, and it's not innocent. It snowballs. It becomes a runaway train. It becomes a forest fire with one match, right? And so it's very dangerous. He does not know that it will cost him his life. And it says also there in Proverbs, she's cast down many wounded, and many strong men she's slain. And so here you've got, how many times have we seen it? A famous religious, I call him religious because not necessarily a true believer, but some sort of a spiritual man in society. He falls to sexual temptation. The next thing you know, where is he at? He's gone. Not even in his place anymore. His marriage is ruined. His kids are gone. And it happens. It's a very serious thing, but that struck me from those verses. It's final.